Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another webinar from the Macdonald-Laurier Institute. My name is Jonathan Berkshire Miller, and I'm Director of the Foreign Affairs, National Security and Defense Program here at the Institute. It's a real pleasure today to join you and be joined today by my friend, Dr. Khalid Ramzi. And the topic that Khalid and I are going to be focused on today is the authoritarian alliances in Afghanistan, and in particular, the role of the People's Republic of China and some of the recent developments of how it's engaging with the Taliban, and how that may affect the interests not only of Canada, but many of our allies and partners abroad. Many listeners will know that Canada has invested a significant amount of blood and treasure, and also emotional feelings into its period in Afghanistan. And at the Institute, we continue to highlight the importance of keeping that engagement going and keeping our obligations to the people of Afghanistan front in our mind. So, Khalid, before turning to you, I just wanted to contextualize things a little bit for the audience. Obviously, we're just this is the week where we've just passed September 11th. We're 23 years from the vicious terrorist attacks in the United States. And we're also 3 years, sadly, a little bit past 3 years, sadly, from the collapse of the Afghan national government and the unfortunate reimposition of power from the Taliban. So I think those are two important markers. But behind the scenes, there's many different topics we could discuss. And I know that the two of us have had opportunities to discuss the situation in Afghanistan before on human rights issues, on governance, etc. But one of the areas that I don't think gets enough attention is the role of some outside actors, and what they have been doing. Number one, before the collapse of the government 3 years ago, but what are some of the activities that they're doing currently with what I think you and I would admit is an illegitimate government right now in Kabul, run by the Taliban. So I wanted to zero in on this and zero in on what China is doing, what are some of the activities that they're engaging with the Taliban on, and a couple sort of thoughts before turning the floor over to you. The first one is, of course, how China sees this geostrategically. We know for several years now, Xi Jinping has promoted his quote-unquote Belt and Road Initiative. And the belt part of that Belt and Road is very much focused on Central Asia and taking advantage of some of the critical minerals and resources in many of the countries of Central Asia. Afghanistan is no stranger to this. We know that China has invested significantly in many of the resources that Afghanistan has. So I think that's one point that I'd like you to talk a little bit about when it comes to your turn. The second area, which I find even more concerning potentially, is the pernicious use of technology, and in particular surveillance technology that is based obviously from Chinese state-owned enterprises or connected enterprises connected with the state that are having an adversarial impact obviously on citizens over the world, all over the world, but in particular in this case in Afghanistan. Just as a data point, I think that we've seen one of the carriers, Huawei, have contracts with the Taliban to install several CCTV cameras, and a dire human rights situation, which is already being faced in the country, now has the potential to be multiplied at many levels due to this level of surveillance. So those are two areas that I'd be interested in your thoughts on. And a third one, of course, is that in this 92-kilometer border that China has with Afghanistan, we can't be thinking about the relationship without thinking of the plight of the Uyghurs, of course, in Xinjiang province. And I think many of China's moves and the motivations for their engagement in Afghanistan are centered around control of the Uyghur population in the West, and how they want to engage with the Taliban to ensure that they have the greatest level of control, whether that's the quote unquote repatriation of Uyghurs from East Afghanistan, or other sort of dynamics. So there's a lot of things on the table, a lot of things we can discuss, but I want to make this a conversation, and I want to turn this over to you now, Khalid, for some opening remarks, and then we'll get into a dialogue. So Khalid, please. And before I pass it over to Khalid, I would be rude to not give you a formal sort of introduction. And in Macdonald-Laurier Institute style, I won't read your long and distinguished CV, but audience, trust me that Khalid is one of the top analysts on Afghanistan and on the region. He has many affiliations. The one we like the best is that he's a senior fellow and leading our work on Afghanistan, but he's also an intellectual entrepreneur and president of the World Anti-Extremism Network. And before that, Khalid had spent 14 years in Kabul leading up a think tank, and is one of the most thoughtful intellectuals on these topics. So Khalid, we're delighted, number one, to have you here at the Institute, but also to have you here today for this discussion. And the virtual floor is yours.
Thank you so much, dear Jonathan, for this kind introduction. It means a lot to me. And I'm very honored that I'm working beside all of you as a member, as a senior fellow at MLI. And hello to all friends who are joining us from different parts of the world. Good morning, good evening, good night, depending on their time zone where they are. Jonathan, you gave me a very good description on the most important issues, and that is so nice that I have heard all these things from you. And thank you for sharing of all these important points. Obviously, I have a number of thoughts, ideas, and facts that based on the reality of the Afghan people and Afghanistan right now, I would like to share in this webinar with our distinguished friends and audience. Before to directly answer your question, I would like to give a kind of more details about what's happening right now in Afghanistan, what is the current status of the country. And beside that, why China and other authoritarians are interested in Afghanistan and trying to grow their influence in the country. Also, what exactly China and other authoritarian regimes are doing at the moment in Afghanistan, and how they are trying to grow their influence in the country. And finally, I would also share my thoughts that what Canada and international community can do to prevent radicalization and authoritarian influence in Afghanistan, and to not let terrorists and authoritarians to make again Afghanistan a threat for the safety and for the security of the world. So let's jump on the first topic, on the first issues, that what is the current status in Afghanistan. As you already mentioned, just last month, Afghanistan marks the 3 years since the return of the Taliban in the power. And based on my recent piece for Inside Policy of MLI, that recently I have written that, and also our friends can find it through the MLI website, that I have mentioned a number of issues, a number of things that Canada can work on that to prevent from radicalization and growing of extremist groups in Afghanistan, and how Canada can help Afghanistan based on current realities that we are facing with that. So I would like to brief shortly a number of issues before I should delve in the conversation. Obviously, Taliban continue to impose radical religious views as they did from 1996 until 2001, that on their first round. They are misinterpreting Islam as they see their own interest on that, and they are every day creating restrictions for the people. So there is no rule of law, there is no freedom of individual freedom for the people, unfortunately. So currently in Afghanistan, we don't have freedom of expression, we don't have freedom of assembly. Based on the recent report of the World Freedom Press Freedom Index, among 180 countries, Afghanistan got 178 position, or ranked as a 178 country based on the freedom of expression index. So the rise of the extremist groups currently is one of the biggest challenges in the country, like ISKP, Daesh, Al-Qaeda, TTP, and many other groups that were rising, were growing day by day in Afghanistan in different parts of the country, and they are killing innocent people around the country. And the other things that I would like to highlight is women rights. Unfortunately, currently, Afghan women, they are experiencing severe restrictions from the current de facto regime. There is no women rights, and based on UNESCO reports, 1.2 million Afghan girls and females, they are out of schools and universities, and they totally banned from going to schools and university. The other important things that right now the country is facing is humanitarian crisis. Unfortunately, 28 million people, they need immediate humanitarian support, and if the international community, if the international countries don't support them, they will lose their lives. So they are in a very bad situation. The other things is there is no life for the minority groups in Afghanistan. We have Sikhs, we have Shias, we have other minority groups that unfortunately, based on the restrictions, based on the rules of the current regime, the life is very difficult for them, and they are dealing with a number of difficulties, and they are living with so many restrictions, and every day, especially Daesh is also attacking on them, and we are losing a number of our people. One of the toughest topic, and one of the important topic that we organized this webinar is the growing of authoritarian alliances in Afghanistan, like China, like Russia, and Iran. And recently, also Kyrgyzstan also joined to this movement as an authoritarian country to support authoritarianism in Afghanistan, the de facto regime. So this is also another things which is happening right now in the country, and all authoritarian regimes from different parts of the world, especially from the region, they are coming together to use Afghanistan resources, Afghanistan lands as a safe place for them, for their strategic planning, for their activities, unfortunately, which is so unfortunate. So let's talk about this, that by considering of all these facts, by considering of all these things which is happening right now in Afghanistan, which of course needs immediately response and actions from international organizations, from international governments such as Canada, that invested in Afghanistan millions of dollars, and they had very active presence in Afghanistan. Well, let's talk that why China and other authoritarians are interested in Afghanistan, and how they are trying to grow their influence. Unfortunately, by the failed policies of U.S. And its allies, and also plus Afghan politicians, lead us to this point. So we are experiencing this situation. Afghanistan currently became a promising land for authoritarians and also for extremist groups that they see Afghanistan as a promising land for their activities, for their works, and for their mission to kill more innocent people, not only in Afghanistan but around the world. And they are coming together to create their policies, to make their strategic plans, and they are making their allies from Afghanistan. And all these things happened, and all these things emerged unfortunately, based on some bad policies or some not good policies that U.S. and other allies of Afghanistan created for the country since 2014, and especially after the complete withdrawal of NATO forces and U.S. from Afghanistan. The country went through another phase, through another challenges phase. So after the collapse of Afghanistan Republic government, China strategically increased its influence in Afghanistan to work closely with Taliban and to keep their influence in the region, especially in Afghanistan, based on a number of factors, based on a number of issues. Especially, we can mention four issues or four things that, based on these four important issues and interests, China is interested and growing its influence in Afghanistan. Number one, as we all know, the authoritarians, they have the same ideologies among themselves. So they are very united among themselves. They have the same ideologies to restrict people from their basic freedom, from their lives. And exactly this is happening in Afghanistan. All those groups, all those regimes that they are authoritarian, as currently Afghanistan is leading by an authoritarian regime, they are uniting in Afghanistan and they have very good ties with each other. And as I mentioned, they are using Afghanistan as a tools for their missions and for their big programs or initiatives for the world, to fight against the Western ideologies and to promote their own ideologies from the country. The second thing, obviously, China has a strong economic interest and also in Afghanistan, and also they are exploiting the natural resources of the country. Obviously, we can mention the mining industry of Afghanistan, as I'm sure our esteemed audience, they know that Afghanistan is a rich country in terms of natural resources, and China is very interested to extract all these things that they need on their business industries. And they are very interested in these things. This is one of the key points for China. The second thing, as you mentioned briefly, that the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative, as Afghanistan has very strategic location located in the heart of Asia, China is very interested to somehow keep their influence. They should be able to work on the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative in the near future with the current Afghan regime. And they had a number of meetings about this issue with the current Afghanistan, the current Taliban Minister of Foreign Affairs. More than 10 times, based on my reports and based on my investigations, they met and they talk about this issue, that how Taliban can support them to China should start practical working on these things. The third things, China, of course, needs the support of Taliban to use them as a tool on countering East Turkestan Islamic Movement, ETIM, which they are working actively as extremist groups, as terrorist groups, and they are using Taliban to prevent extremist activities into the Xinjiang region. Also, number four, they are working to promote their ideology and underline liberal democracy. For example, they are currently, I will talk later that what they are doing exactly, but just shortly, they are trying their best to undermine liberal democracy and what Western countries did in last 20 years for Afghanistan. So let's jump on this, that what exactly China and other authoritarian countries or regimes are currently doing and trying to grow their influence in Afghanistan. The first thing, unfortunately, I'm sure that the audience will somehow also know that our friends that China, Russia, and Iran, they were the first countries that they somehow gave a kind of legitimization for Taliban. They accepted their ambassadors. They gave them the opportunity, the chance to they open their embassies in Beijing, in Tehran, and in Moscow. And currently, they have very close relationship with Taliban, very tight relationships. And unfortunately, they are somehow legitimizing Taliban, which is a terrorist group, and we all are working actively to not let to a terrorist group should be legitimized by international community or by foreign countries. The second thing, as I mentioned briefly earlier, China is extracting mines and natural resources of Afghanistan. I would like to emphasize that China know exactly that establishing of investment infrastructure in a country needs a lot of security, or at least having of good security. But what China is trying right now to do in Afghanistan, through their own channels, through their own methods, not officially, but like, for example, we can say like in black market, they are smuggling the natural resources of Afghanistan based on their close ties, based on their relations with the leaders of Taliban, with the top leaders of Taliban. So they are not announcing that publicly through the media, through other channels, but based on my investigations, but based on my research that I did that I interviewed with a number of people on the ground, researchers and other colleagues, I found out that they are actively working on INAC copper mines, which is in Logar province of Afghanistan, and also they are actively They came together now for the lithium in the country. So this is another important thing that currently they are doing in Afghanistan. The third things that they are unfortunately doing is one of the most important things. They are promoting their communism and their authoritarian ideologies, and they are undermining the liberal democracy through different ways, through different channels. Again, based on my research, based on my finding that I found out recently, especially from China, they established 9 think tanks and organizations in Afghanistan officially they should promote the things that Beijing is ordering for them in Afghanistan, which is a very big warning for all those freedom fighters of Afghanistan and for all human rights activists of Afghanistan and the region, that we should come together and tackle these things. So they are supporting NGOs currently right now. I have a number of evidence which shows that China is now giving grants, giving a number of other type of support through their embassies and through these 9 well-established organizations that they established through the Ministry of Economy of Afghanistan. And they are now influencing, they are traveling to different parts of the country, to different parts of the provinces, and they are establishing their offices in different regions of the country and trying to work closely with the civil society organizations, with the media. Obviously, they are working with the media and giving them funding to they should undermine the liberal democracy or democratic ideas, and they should work to promote the ideologies that China want to see in Afghanistan. The other things that I would like to share is the extremists and the authoritarians, as I somehow mentioned earlier too, they find a very safe and a very strategic locations for themselves to create their strategies against West and against liberal democracy. So currently, Afghanistan is a very safe place for China, for Russia, for Iran. They are coming together. They are meeting with each others and not letting everyone to know, but based on the research and my finding, they are meeting in Afghanistan. They are coming on strategies that how they can work together from Afghanistan, how they can create more bases for themselves, for their countries in the country, and so on. So let's talk about this, that what, based on these factors, based on these things, which is happening right now in the country, let's jump into this, that what Canada and international community can do to at least to tackle some of these issues and to not let them to win on their strategies on the things that they are trying to promote in Afghanistan or to do for Afghanistan. As China, as I mentioned, they are stealing the natural resources of Afghanistan on their own interest without any proper contract with the current de facto regime or any previous contract with the previous government. So they are trying their best to take away everything that they can from Afghanistan and to keep their influence in the region and also in the country as much as they can. Based on my opinion, I think one of the most important things, as I already mentioned this in my recent piece for Inside Policy too, is to support civic resistance. I'm sure that, Jonathan, you also remember that when we organized the last Toronto dialogue on Afghanistan in here, the distinguished guest speakers who were very VIP diplomats of Canada and other countries in Afghanistan, they all expressed that the world is not in a favor of another intervention, military interventions to Afghanistan. So we all should come to this point that we strongly need resistance, ideological resistance. We should tackle these groups. We should tackle these their ideologies. So what I would like to emphasize, what I would like to mention, that we strongly need a kind of to support civic resistance in Afghanistan. We can support scholars. We should support media. As I mentioned, China is supporting them. Why we should not support the medias to promote the ideologies that we work, that we stand for that for more than 20 years. Our enemies, they are investing too much, to be honest, in Afghanistan. They are investing too much in the wrong way to undermine our ideologies, our activities, or the liberal democracy in the country. But on the opposite side, somehow in recent years, the support for civic resistance is somehow less, and we have to consider that as a tool, as one of the ways that we can counter the influence of authoritarian regimes, and also we can counter the influence of Taliban in a number of issues. The second thing, as I somehow mentioned, that Canada invested millions of dollars in Afghanistan in the last 20 years during the previous government. But unfortunately, in last 2 or 3 years, Canada is very quiet. So I think it's a good time that Canada should take an active role in the current situation of Afghanistan, and Canada should be a real change maker in Afghanistan. Has they invested? Has Canada lost a lot of their soldiers in Afghanistan, more than 150? So we have to let the Canadian government know that the Afghan community, Afghan people, they strongly need their support, their active enrollment in the current situation of Afghanistan. The other things that why currently Afghanistan is also somehow influencing by those authoritarian regimes is because of the support or somehow humanitarian aid that they are providing to the, for example, under the name of the for the people or something like that. So we have to consider that also as one of the most important point, and we have to support the crisis that Afghanistan is facing right now is huge, and the people, they strongly needs our support and our humanitarian aid. So this is also one of the points that we have to consider as a recommendation or as a solution. The other things that I would like to mention, we should not forget our allies. A number of people, thousands of people work alongside Canada and US and other Western countries in last 20 years. But unfortunately, right now, although Canada did their best and they still bringing a number of people, but still we forget about a number of people that who work alongside Canada and also for the US, and they are now dealing with a lot of difficulties in Afghanistan. Their life is completely in danger. So I'm calling for Canada, I'm asking Canadian government that those people needs our supports, and we have to give them a path to Canada to bring them here, and they should be able to create new lives for them with opportunities to work for the future of the country. The other things, supporting of Afghan diaspora is one of the other important issues that we can use them as Canada bring a number of people already in here, US and other countries, and they need the resources, the things that they want to work for their country, for Afghanistan. So this is also one of the important points that we have to consider, and Canada can work on this with Afghan diaspora to have their opinion for the future of the country, and also to support them through different channels, through different ways that they can be change makers on behalf of Canadian government and Canadian side. The other things that I would like to also emphasize is supporting and strengthen regional alliances. We can work with, for example, at least with Pakistan, with India, with Tajikistan, and international community can support them that they have to provide, for example, humanitarian aid and other resources for Afghan people. We should prevent somehow the influence of the authoritarian regimes like Russia and China and Iran from the ground. The other things that we can consider as a solution is increase of diplomatic pressure. I'm sure that Canada somehow did very well. We had a very good representative from Canada in last 2 and 3 meetings of Doha, which was organized for about Afghanistan in Doha. and they shared the concerns and the things that they had to share. And still, Canada can take active role to increase diplomatic pressure on Taliban, that they have to consider at least women rights, they have to let girls to go to schools, and at least some other basic rights that we can work to that until we should reach to an inclusive government or another type of government should be acceptable for everyone. And finally, I'm calling or I'm requesting from all friends, from international organizations, from think tanks, from everyone who are involved in Afghanistan cases, that we have to document the things that China, Russia, and Iran, along with Taliban, that they are doing to restrict the people from their basic rights, from their freedoms, and to take away the freedom of the people in Afghanistan. And that's very important, that we have to document all these things, all these scenarios that they are creating for Afghan people, and the allies that they are making on the ground, and the supports that they are making for the extremist groups and for the radical groups to kill innocent people, not only in Afghanistan, but in the region, but also even in the globe. If we let Afghanistan they should do everything that they want, again, Afghanistan will be a big threat for the safety, for the security of the country. As we yesterday was the 9/11, and we talked too much in different medias and different platforms about that incident. So we have to consider that, and we have to consider that incident, that tragic incident, that we lost thousands of innocent people's lives through the attack of insurgents and terrorist groups who emerged from Afghanistan, who use Afghanistan as a safe place for themselves to work for their ideologies, for their activities. So I'm sure that if we let Afghanistan like this, again, unfortunately, we will experience such incidents in the future. So it is a must for all international community, for all think tanks, for all individuals that would believe in freedom and human rights and prosperity, that we all have to come together and work to not let Afghanistan to the situation to be continued like this. And we have to fight against them, and we have to bring them on the table, on the accountability, and we have to work together to create an inclusive government it should be acceptable for everyone based on liberal democracy in the country. Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you so much, Khalid, and thank you for the moral clarity of your remarks, and in particular the final part. That was a very comprehensive, a summary and analysis. But many things. I was madly scribbling notes down throughout your presentation, but I, in particular, appreciated your part at the end where you gave some very concrete recommendations about what Canada could potentially do, how we could work with our allies, and thinking about this this situation in a broad spectrum. So, one of the things as a think tank that we often think about is, look, we don't have necessarily the roles and responsibilities of government, but we have other responsibilities, relationships, and stakeholders. And I wholeheartedly agree with you that civil society can, should, and in many ways must play an important role in elevating this discussion and holding folks to account. One of the points that I think you made, which was an important one, is that Canada has invested significant amount of money and also resources and time in this. It's something that we need to show leadership on. Showing up to a couple meetings and having a few diplomats focused on it is important. But I think really taking back the leadership mantle, that mantle will not be a military mantle at this point in time, but definitely in a diplomatic sense, and also supporting civil society, I think will be very important. So, I have several questions I could ask, but we have about 20 minutes left, and I know we have a lot of interesting folks watching this online. So just a note to all of those who are watching this online on different platforms, whether it's YouTube, Twitter, etc. Do feel free. Now's your time to ask some questions, to put out some of your thoughts. We'll try to get through them, as many as we can. So we'll sort of enter this lightning round. We'll challenge both Khalid and myself to try to answer your questions very quickly. In the meantime, while the audience is stimulating their thoughts and thinking about what they may ask, Khalid, I have a couple sort of questions to ask you coming from your excellent remarks. The first one is centered on the theme of this webinar, which is authoritarian actors. And I think you gave me a really good summation of some of the activities that China is engaged in. You also mentioned Russia and Iran and also Kyrgyzstan. I wanted to get a sense from you where you see the level of coordination between some of these authoritarian actors. So obviously, they all have their different interests. Some of them are competing, but from my vantage point, in particular, Iran, China, and Russia, increasingly are finding ways to coordinate trilaterally. We see this in the military domain. And I think the fundamental area, while they disagree on many things and have their own historical sort of issues, the one strategic thing that they agree on is undermining the United States, the quote unquote global West, and many of the mechanisms that are associated with that. So I wanted to zoom in on Afghanistan. And do you see any evidence or any examples of the three sides sort of collaborating or coordinating narratives and messages? Have you seen this in the recent years since the fall of the Republic?
Thank you, Jonathan. Yes, of course, I have seen this too much. And as I mentioned during my remarks, that I did a number of research on the ground through a number of scholars and other colleagues. And all of these research shows that they are very coordinated among themselves, China, Russia, and Iran. And the leading of this group is on the hand of China. China is influencing too much, and Russia is also somehow acting and concerning the things or the facts for the security of the Central Asian countries. They are wondering too much from that point of view, that maybe the growing of the Daesh ISKP in the northern provinces of Afghanistan would be a big threat for them to insecure Central Asian countries, and that's why Russia is too much influencing on the security issues to have a kind of control in the region. They are meeting regularly with Tajikistan leaders, with their intelligence. I think recently the head of intelligence of Tajikistan visited Kabul, and he met with the Taliban top leaders. So what I would like to emphasize that yes, they are very coordinated. One of them is working mostly to influence, to have the control of the country based on their own ideologies and methods to keep them secure on security issues, and use Afghanistan as a threat for other nations. That they would obviously do that, but the others obviously working to get a lot of economic benefits from the country, which is obviously China, and also to promote their ideologies. And among these three countries, Iran obviously has, as we all know, that they are supporting Hamas, which is a terrorist group, and they are killing innocent people in the Middle East. So they are also influencing too much in the country, especially with the Shia people, that they're a minority in Afghanistan. And beside that, they have their weapons, their own equipments. That recent evidence shows that they're also somehow trying to give the chance for the Taliban that in case if they need any military equipment, they will also, as they are doing that for the Hamas, they will do that for the same thing they will do for the Taliban too. So they are very coordinated among themselves. And as I mentioned earlier, they find a very good place to do big bad things for the world, and to create more problem and restrict and create more restrictions for the freedom in the world.
Well, thanks so much, Khaled. Well, we do have one question that came in from the audience, and I have one additional one to ask you. So first I'll ask mine, and maybe I'll ask the audience one at the same time. For my question, we talked about regional actors. So you mentioned, of course, India and others in the region. We talked a bit about Central Asia as well. Is there a possibility, or is there a sort of a imperative in many ways to engage with those actors who also have relationships with some of the authoritarians? So not in maybe complicated relationships, but I think of, for example, India, which has a complex relationship with Russia, has a complex relationship with Iran as well. By no means perfect, but they have some discussion, a level of dialogue, whereas many in the global West have next to zero discussion. Can we play a role, whether it's Canada or others? I mean, right now our relationship with India is very challenged, but are there others who can have quiet discussions with partners like India and say, look, when you're discussing with Russia or Iran, elevating the interests of Afghanistan and ensuring that many of the things that we've talked about today do not happen is extremely important for our national interest and also for the region. So I was thinking in my mind of how do we leverage partners in the region, in particular India strikes me as one that might be closer to our interests, to make sure that they can't change the minds of Moscow and Tehran. I mean, I'm not trying to say that, but at least we know that they have those discussions and relations, that they could highlight the plight of Afghanistan. So that's my first sort of point in question. The second one that came in from the audience, I think, and is interesting, is more of a sort of state of play right now in Afghanistan. And you highlighted this very well. But you mentioned Daesh, ISIS-K, you mentioned Al-Qaeda. What is the current sort of geographic scope of control in Afghanistan? Has the Taliban do they really have control of some of the outlying regions? Have they sort of been working with some of these groups in a sort of half sense to buy them off in a way so that they can maintain control? What is the sort of sense of the relationship between the Taliban and Kabul and some of these extremist groups that you mentioned? So that's the question from the audience, and then my question as well.
Thank you, Jonathan. To answer the first question, to be honest, Afghanistan never experienced good things from its neighboring countries. Every time, if we read the history, if we see the history, unfortunately, we always experience something bad from our neighboring countries. But among all these countries, somehow Afghan people, they are respecting Indian, and also the relationship between India and Afghanistan, especially in the last 20 years, we had very good relationship, and still it is somehow on the same way with the people. But obviously, as Taliban is too much influenced by the power and by the ideologies of the Pakistan and India, they see each other as enemies. So it might be very difficult for Afghanistan, for example, to expect something good from Pakistan, because obviously they are supporting, they are working with Taliban. But from India, yes, the people have the expectation they should act. And personally, I see that they can act as a good actor in this phase. They did some efforts to raise at least the voice of Afghan women on some international dialogue, on some international conferences. But still, that is not enough. But we can expect from India as a regional country, and they have the power to set, especially as they are good also with Russia, as they are good also with China. They should also influence them to at least they should respect the international laws, the international documents, and they should not interfere in the current situation of Afghanistan to make it even worse, even much bad than the current situation. But what I would like to emphasize that India did great job for Afghan people in last 20 years. They invested too much. They made our parliament. They invested in a number of schools. They invested in other infrastructure of the country. But for every country, they have somehow their own interests, and they see their interests, and they change their interests based on the circumstances. And I see something different, some different ideologies, some different things from India too. Recently, I had a very important interview with one of Indian scholars, and he expressed this even in the same way that I'm expressing in this webinar, that India is always looking for its own interest, and I am sure that it is common for every country. And right now, for India, although they can influence other authoritarian regions, but right now, I think, based on a number of facts, based on a number of ideas, India is also somehow tolerating with the Taliban. They are trying somehow they should tolerate, they should have a kind of connection with them. They are trying also somehow, they send a number of their diplomats to Kabul at least 4 to 6 months before, to observe the situation, that how they can open their embassy back in Kabul. So all these things shows that they are somehow interested to be engaged with the current authoritarian regime, which they are Taliban. About the second question, this is a very important question, a very good question. A number of things. When we are answering these things, we should consider a number of issues. The first things that we should highlight is that Taliban, they are not the Taliban that they were in Afghanistan in 1996. So they had one leader, and that leader was saying, for example, do that or don't do that, and all of them were following that leader. But currently, they are very divided among themselves. So, for example, they have a lot of opinion currently exists among Talibans. They are not good. They are not united like before. Although their ideology is the same, that they are the enemy of liberal democracy, they are the enemy of freedom, they are the enemy of prosperity, they are the enemy of all these ideologies, but still they are separated among themselves based on a few special characteristics, based on some other factors that they see their interests. For example, we have the Taliban who belongs to Kandahar, and then we have the Taliban who belongs to Paktia. So they have somehow two different mentality, different ideologies. And based on this fact, and based on the fact that Daesh and also Al-Qaeda, especially based on the fact that Taliban is always somehow, before they did that, why they gave a safe haven for Osama bin Laden in Afghanistan, and they were in close contact with them. And also on their new phase, on their new regime, as the leader of Al-Qaeda, U.S. killed it last year in Kabul. All these things shows, all these evidence shows that still they are in contact, they are supporting Al-Qaeda, and they are working together to create more insafety and create more instability in the world. So based on that, the Taliban has the connection. They have connection with Al Qaeda, and also based on the fact that Daesh OSKP is growing very fast in the country. Just last week, we lost about 10 young people in one of the attacks of Daesh in Kabul, in Kabul province. So based on 3 points, based on all these 3 points, I would like to say that it is very, very difficult for the current de facto regime to control all over the Afghanistan. And also the facts that every day we are experiencing, we see growing of a new group, growing of a new armed group under the name of different names that they claim that they are working for the freedom of Afghanistan in different names. And by their radical point of view, I can say that it is very difficult for Taliban to control all over Afghanistan. And in one hand, in the other hand, still they have connections with these insurgents groups, with these extremist groups, because their ideologies are the same, and they are on the same track on a number of these activities on a number of these issues. So I hope that I covered to answer this question in a good way.
Thanks very much, Khalid. That was fascinating and a really great answer on both of those questions. I know the audience has more on their minds. I've got a lot more on my minds, but I know we'll have more opportunities as well, Khalid. Thank you so much for joining us for this discussion, and thanks again for our audience for joining this discussion on authoritarian alliances in Afghanistan. I said there's much more to tease out, but a pledge to the audience that we will be continuing to focus on this. To Khalid's initial sort of appeal in your intervention, this is something that civil society has to take an important role on, and this is an important topic for the Macdonald-Laurier Institute, and we will continue focusing on it with your wisdom and leadership, Khalid. So thank you again for joining us, and we'll look forward to seeing everyone again very soon.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you so much.